In Psalm 126, or Negev, refers to the arid southern desert of Israel, used as a powerful metaphor for dryness, hardship, and exile, where the psalmist prays for God to bring sudden, miraculous restoration like life-giving streams suddenly flowing through dry riverbeds after rain, turning barrenness into a vibrant, fruitful landscape of joy and abundance. It signifies a deep longing for God's swift, transformative presence, turning tears and sowing and sorrow into reaping with shouts of joy. A reading from Psalm 126. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. Then our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with shouts of joy. Then it was said among the nations, "The Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we rejoiced. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like the watercourses in the Negev. May those who sow in tears reap the shouts of joy. Those who go out weeping, bearing the seed for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy, carrying their sheaves." May God add joy to our reading, hearing, and keeping of this holy word.
Obviously, we know that this is the first in a series of listening to other voices and featuring other perspectives on our faith. And I'm very privileged to introduce our first preacher, Rabbi Jessica Wainer, who, as you know, serves the Etz Chaim congregation in Lombard. She previously served as the Associate Rabbi and Director of Congregational Learning for the Northern Virginia Hebrew congregation in West Reston, Virginia. Rabbi Wainer was ordained from the Cincinnati campus of the Hebrew Union College and the Jewish Institute of Religion in 2016. And Jessie was born in nearby Oak Park, Illinois, where she was raised, and so she's thrilled to be home to serve the Jewish community of the western suburbs of Chicago. And in addition to her ordination, she also earned a master's degree in Hebrew letters from the Hebrew Union College, a bachelor's degree in Jewish studies with honors, and minored in Hebrew and psychology at Indiana University. She also earned a master's degree in education from Xavier University. Rabbi Wainer loves to develop creative worship experiences and walk with families through their times of joy and sorrow and bring the Torah to faith of people of all ages. She currently serves as head of the faculty for the Union of Reform's Judaism 6 Points Creative Arts Academy, where she is the founding faculty member. She previously served on the Central Conference of the American Rabbi Task Force on Women's Experience in the Rabbinate. Outside her work in the Jewish community, Rabbi Wainer enjoys scuba diving, long walks with her dog Tally, playing musical instruments, and baking challah. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Jessica Wainer to the pulpit.
Thank you. I am honored to be here this morning to share this message. The rabbis advised, keep two truths in your pocket. One should read, "I am but dust and ashes," and the other should read, "The entire world was created for me." An 8-year-old has something else in his pocket, confetti. Why? It's his emergency confetti. He says, during these raw days, he carries it with him everywhere, just in case there is good news. Talking about joy has felt overwhelmingly daunting. The conversations that are dominating our communal discourse are filled with sorrow and despair. Will the weight of the world's suffering ever lift? Is it safe to speak openly about what we believe? Should we express our values publicly when it might invite criticism or conflict? Do the benefits outweigh the risks when we stand up for what matters to us? How do we navigate political landscapes that force impossible choices between different values that we hold dear? In the Jewish world, even more so, we are asking these questions as we continue to experience the increasing barrage of anti-Semitic violent acts. Will the necessary security presence at our services create barriers to interfaith engagement? Is it safe to put a menorah in our window for Hanukkah this year? Should my student wear their Jewish star necklace to school? Do the benefits outweigh the risks if I out myself as Jewish at work? Is it better to support someone politically who is anti-Semitic but aligns with the rest of my values, or someone who is supportive of the Jewish people but not of the values that are also important to me? And now you see my dilemma. How can we rationalize spending precious time speaking about joy rooted in faith when there are so many other pertinent sermon topics? Ecclesiastes teaches us that there is a time for everything and every type of experience, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing. Our sages understood that even in our darkest hours, opportunities for laughter and dancing persisted. As a rabbi, one of the greatest honors that I have is to be with families in their times of mourning as they say goodbye to their loved ones. One of my favorite parts of accompanying them on this journey is listening to the stories that are shared during the eulogies. The memories shared evoke tears of sadness and joyous laughter, often occurring simultaneously. These are moments that, when we allow ourselves to envision them, can kindle authentic joy just as much as moments not marred by sadness. Joy and sorrow are inextricably linked. In his book of essays, Inciting Joy, Ross Gay proposes that joy does not merely coexist with pain and grief, but actually emerges from how we tend to one another through the suffering. He asks, what if joy, instead of refuge or relief from heartbreak, is what effloresces from us as we help each other carry our heartbreak? Gay's insight about collective care took a particular resonance recently at a gathering of the local Metro IAF community organizing group, DuPage United, a group that I am a part of and where we gather often together as clergy. When we were asked to share how we were feeling, the collective response was unequivocal: exhaustion. After listening to the spiritual exhaustion of my colleagues and after sharing my own with them, I asked the following question. I recognize that we are all depleted, and this moment feels particularly overwhelming. But where are you witnessing joy in your communities? The pregnant pause that followed was answer enough. Perhaps no figure better embodies this Jewish theological truth and this shared theological truth than Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof. For those of you who haven't seen this beloved musical, I highly recommend it. Tevye is a poor Jewish dairyman in the early 20th century of Russia, navigating tradition, change, and persecution from the Tsar's army with equal measures of complaint and faith. Always weighing things on one hand or the other, he bursts into celebratory song and dance following the engagement of his daughter Tzeitel while facing an imminent pogrom. He says, life has a way of confusing us, blessing and bruising us, so drink l'chaim to life. Like Tevye, like our ancient sages, we must seize every opportunity to cultivate joy. In an era of overwhelming global upheaval, let us commit ourselves to embracing joy as a spiritual practice, as an act of spiritual resistance. Our ability to find joy even in the midst of exhaustion or sorrow is deeply rooted in ancient wisdom and texts that we all share. Drawing from Psalm 126 that we just heard a few moments ago, we are taught, Hazorim bedina berina yiksoru, those who sow in tears shall reap with joy. This ancient promise isn't just poetic metaphor, but a roadmap for spiritual resistance. As Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz explains, the act of planting requires back-breaking labor and is filled with uncertainty. Farmers with no guarantee their crops will grow. And yet, when the harvest arrives, all that anxiety transforms into celebration and song. The psalm teaches us that the joy doesn't negate our struggles. It emerges precisely because we've weathered them. I witnessed this truth come alive when this verse became the summer theme this year at the Jewish summer camp where I serve on faculty. Initially, I questioned this choice. Summer camp, as many of you might know, is supposed to be a place of unbridled joy, an isolated sanctuary from the outside world. Young people face enough challenges without emphasizing sorrow alongside joy. But over a 12-day transformative period, I watched these campers ages 10 to 18 discover something profound. The joy experienced after struggle possesses a depth and a resonance that pure and uncomplicated and happiness and joy cannot match. Through tears and challenges, they learned that the sweetest harvest, emerges from the most difficult sowing. Choosing to celebrate the harvest, or in their case, their showcase, is itself an act of defiance against despair. If camp has taught me anything over the years, it is that this kind of intentional joy-making should be extended beyond a summer session. So the question, to rephrase Marie Kondo, is, how can we spark joy? The spiritual resistance of joy is deeply rooted in our shared sacred texts, in the Torah or the Old Testament. In Deuteronomy, we receive the call. In Hebrew, we say, V'samachta b'chagecha, to celebrate and find happiness, both in our festivals and in the abundance that surrounds us. This isn't merely a suggestion, it's a commandment, positioning joy as religious obligation rather than an optional emotion. The prophetic tradition builds on this foundation with texts like Jeremiah envisioning a restored Jerusalem filled with the sounds of kol sason vekol simcha, the voices of celebration and gladness. Here, joy becomes not just personal experience, but communal vision, something that transforms entire communities and cities. Our rabbis of the Talmud, who wrote predominantly during the 3rd through 6th centuries CE, taught, one may neither stand to pray from an atmosphere of sorrow nor an atmosphere of laziness. Rather, one should approach prayer from an atmosphere imbued with joy of a mitzvah, a sacred deed or commandment. This institutionalization of joy suggests that happiness isn't accidental, but requires intentional cultivation through ritual and community. The Talmudic insight that proper prayer emerges from the joy found in doing these good deeds reveals how joy and spiritual practice intertwine, each feeding the other. Here is what I believe our shared traditions make abundantly clear. Joy doesn't just happen to us. We must choose it. We must cultivate it. We must practice it, especially when it feels most difficult. This is precisely what makes it an act of spiritual resistance. When the world gives us every reason to despair, we can still choose to say yes to joy. My spiritual challenge for each of us today is to move out of always sitting in despair and instead to look for ways to say yes to joy. That choice for us as Jews looks a little bit different today. The Jewish community has seen a significant rise in anti-Semitism over the last many years. In 2018, the largest anti-Semitic attack on American soil happened at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, when 11 people, including 2 brothers of my congregant, were brutally murdered while attending their Saturday morning Shabbat service. Since October 7th, 2023, anti-Semitic attacks in this country have risen over 150%. Over Hanukkah, 15 people were murdered and many others injured on Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia, while they had just gathered there to celebrate Hanukkah. I share this with you not to look for sympathy, but so that you might begin to understand why choosing joy, and especially for Jews in this moment, is an intentional and important act. This isn't only theoretical. I have been blessed to witness this very choice being made again and again in my work as a rabbi. I see our families choosing joy when they not only bring their children to religious school, but stay and build relationships with their peers. I see our congregants choosing joy when they gather together to welcome a new baby or a convert into the covenant. And I see our people choosing joy when they invite their neighbors and friends to be in conversation with one another, to celebrate the diversity of holidays together, and when they embrace each other for exactly who they are. As we gather here this morning, I invite you to think about the ways that you will choose to embrace joy this year, as an individual, as a family, and as a community. What might it look like for you to choose joy this year? And how might you share that joy with others? At the beginning of my sermon, I read a poem by Rabbi Hannah Yerushalmi that elaborates on the teaching of Rabbi Simcha Bonham, a Hasidic philosopher. He teaches that every person should carry 2 pieces of paper in their pocket. In one pocket, we should have a slip of paper that says, "I am but dust and ashes." In the other pocket, Rabbi Bonham teaches, we should have a paper that reads, "The world was created for me." Today, I want to focus on that third item that we should carry in our pocket, a bag of emergency confetti. As Rabbi Bonham teaches, and as we learn from our text, we often hold multiple feelings in our pockets at any given time. We can hold both sorrow and joy, but most often joy is overshadowed by sorrow. Sometimes we need a physical reminder to celebrate those moments, both big and small, of joy. And so here is my challenge for you today. This week, find some time to get yourself a small bag of confetti. Maybe it's an actual physical bag, maybe it's a metaphorical bag, but put it in your pocket, in your purse, in your car, carry it with you, and when you experience a moment of pure joy, when good news arrives, when gratitude overwhelms you, when life surprises you with its sweetness, open that bag and throw some confetti. Make a small, but joyful mess. And if you're with others, let them share in that celebration. Mary Oliver, in her poem, Don't Hesitate, wrote, "If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give in to it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. It could be anything, but very likely you notice it in the instance when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb. Joy indeed is not meant to be a crumb. It is meant to be abundant and generous and overflowing. Mary Oliver urges us not to hesitate when joy suddenly appears, because in a world where so much can never be redeemed, joy might be life's way of fighting back. As we stand on the threshold of this new year, I want to leave you with one final thought. Joy rooted in faith is not naive optimism. It is not the denial of darkness or the dismissal of real struggle. It is this kind of joy is the profound recognition that even in, and especially in, the most challenging of times, we have the power to choose how we respond to the world around us. When we choose joy, we join the ranks of those who came before us. For me, These ancestors who danced at weddings in the ghettos, who sang songs of praise even as they faced persecution, who lit Shabbat candles in hidden spaces and found God in the most unlikely of places. Your own ancestors of faith, whatever tradition they came from, understood something similar. Every faith tradition has its stories of those who chose to celebrate in the face of suffering, who refused to let circumstances steal their capacity for joy. They understood what we must remember. Joy is not frivolous, but fierce. It is not weakness, but strength. It is not escape, but engagement with life in all of its complexity. So get yourself some emergency confetti. Carry it with intention. Use it not just for the monumental moments, but for the small miracles that surround us daily. A child's laughter during a holiday meal, the warmth of community prayer, the simple blessing of being together in sacred space. And just remember, every time that you choose joy, every time that you celebrate instead of despair, every time you say yes to the fullness of life rather than retreating in fear, you are performing an act of spiritual resistance. You are declaring that darkness does not get the final word. You are proclaiming with your very being that we are still here and we are still celebrating all that life has to offer. As we stand together at the start of this calendar year, I offer you this blessing. May this be a good year and a sweet year for each of us, filled with moments worthy of confetti and the wisdom to recognize them when they come. Ken Yiratzon, may this be God's will.